All right, welcome back once again. This is Amuna Yisrael, SOULONOMiCS 101, and welcome. I'm simulcasting once again. I'll be doing this for 2 more days for the week. A labor of love. You know, you gotta put your stamp of love on it. So if you see me like yesterday looking both ways, you'll know why it is. I want to thank everybody who is joining us and who has joined us, who took the time to listen. Who saw the first and second episode um, of the Roots series. This one is called, I'm quite sure they probably have their own names for it, but I'm calling it Culture of Ignorance because not only, again, for the reason of why I'm doing this, is not only to watch the movie, it's not entertainment. It is research, okay? And so the reason why I'm looking at what is happening in the research project, which is the movie Roots. For those who just joined us, welcome. This is Amuna Yisrael. Once again, I haven't started as yet. I'm going to do kind of like what I did yesterday, and hopefully you'll share your thoughts of episode 2. This meeting right here serves so many functions. A, we can have communication with one another. We can have a space to express whatever the watching that event brought up. We have a space where we can share, where we can heal, basically. You understand? So, because sometimes you see things and you have nowhere to go, you don't know who to speak to, you know, and it's all bottled up inside. So this is the space. I have a thing I've been doing for almost 2 years now. It's called Take Time to Heal. It's a teleconference. So this is like Take Time to Heal pumped up because I'm actually doing it for the public. And this is where you can say what's on your mind. That's number one. It's kind of like social media, but you know, there's actually people on the other end that actually cares to hear. Because in social media, people just throw it out there in hopes that somebody's gonna snag onto it. But you clicked on this link because it clearly says Culture of Ignorance, Roots 2016. So hopefully you clicked on it knowing what you were gonna get. You understand what I'm saying? And so, yes, feel free to share, feel free to let your thoughts be known concerning what you saw and how you feel. A lot of that's going around, but I don't know how productive it is, the way in which we're doing it or the way in which we're accustomed to do it. For some reason, and this is my little rant before I actually start. For some reason, we have been, because of the oppression that we only want to complain about, we have, as a people, not everyone, but a good amount, have become chronic complainers. Like we complain for everything. This is a state and a condition of someone who feels disenfranchised, someone who feels empowered. And so the only thing that we can do is murmur and complain. That is not something that someone else has to fix. That is something that we have to fix. Oftentimes, and I'm seeing as I'm reading the memes, whether it be Twitter, whether it be Facebook and YouTube, is complain. Okay, they made the movie, but they should have made it like this. They didn't make the movie, but they should have made it like this. And why didn't they put it? And I'm like, hello. Number one, this is just for a moment before I start. We have a choice. Just like you're watching me right now, we all have choices. This is one very important thing that we need to get. You have a choice. If you don't want to watch Roots, don't click it. You understand? And if someone else wants to watch Roots, let them watch it. If they want to glean from it, let them glean. If you don't want to glean from it, don't glean. But what we do is, okay, I don't want to watch it, and I'm going to make up all these reasons that are unfounded as to why. Okay, you don't want to watch it. Did you read the book? Like, I'm going to get to that later, but did you read the book? It's a big, fat, thick book written by Alex Haley. If you don't want to watch what the Europeans are interpreting, and you say that this black man created this narrative from his family history, did you read the book? Did you read any book? So oftentimes we rely on entertainment only as the teacher. Entertainment, this is what they produced it for, with historical value, is not your sole teacher. And the expectation that it is for us is like, we have to, no one else can do that for us. I'm sorry. We have to come out of that mindset. We have to break free. Don't let me break out into song. What Bob Marley say? He said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Nobody but you could do it. Yeah, I know Amuna could do that, right? Yeah, that's the, but anyway, you're the one who can do it. So anyway, once again, welcome. This is Amuna Yisrael, SOULONOMiCS 101 Roots, episode number 2. So, understand that when you click on the link and you see my face, I'm going to go in a little deeper. If you are disenchanted or if you don't want to hear it, praise be to the Most High. I pray all goes well. But for those of us who are tired of being tired and who actually want to understand what's going on in our own lives, in our own families, we have to do the work. The expectation that I can remain in my ignorance, be comfortable in my ignorance, and think that everybody's going to do stuff for me. And then even when people are doing stuff, we complain. So we have to get out of that mode of complaint. Anyway, how is everybody today? It just does this to me. It just does this to me. Like, come on now. We have to actually do the work. The damage is there. And it was shown in, I'm jumping a little bit, but in the episode, now back to Roots, episode 2, when he got his foot cut off, which we're going to go into a little bit, and now it was time for him to get up. Even though he was injured, no one could walk for him. Even though he's missing his toes, no one else could walk for him. They could nurse him back, which is what Belle did. She nursed him back. Fiddler was there. They nursed him back, but no one else could do that work for him. You notice that? And that is just like a little picture. And if we blow that picture up and say that the Black community through slavery has been injured, regardless of that, once you acknowledge that injury and you begin to heal yourself, no one else can get up and walk for you but you. And we saw him fighting with that to overcome without complaint, without, he just had that warrior spirit to say, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to get back and I'm going to be able to maneuver. Even if it wasn't in the fullness of how I used to be, at least I'm functional now. Welcome, everybody. Let's go into it. Before I do, let me go here. How is everybody? Have you taken your notes? Hopefully you're taking your notes and you're charting what you've seen so that you can begin to process it. For those who are on the live stream, I'm about to share my screen with you right now. And for those who are on Facebook, you're going to hear my little thoughts. And hopefully you're taking notes because like yesterday, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what we're seeing. And hopefully we'll do the research on it. Do the research, do the research, do the research. Let me tell you a little secret. Does anybody know who John Connors is? In my research, I realized that there's a man named John Connors. That's his name, right? And he has been like, 50 years in the Senate. He's a quote unquote Black man, 50 plus years in the Senate. And for these 50 years, about 20 years ago, every second year, he presents this bill, this reparation bill. But 10 times this reparation bill has not been passed. And the reparation bill is to not how much they're going to give you for reparations yet. The reparation bill is, I forgot how many millions of dollars it was. He wants the research done to be able to assess the damage, to get an accurate number of how much is owed for reparations. And when you look at all of the allowances, maybe I'll go over that next time. I did it one time before. If you look over all of the allowances, he's talking about a massive research team. And I bet you for all those who are like, blah, 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 I don't want to hear it, da, 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 da. If the incentive on the other side is money, if the incentive on the other time is reparations, all of a sudden everybody going to be interested in slave narratives and history and the damage that's done in slavery. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out because I just think it's very funny. But we'll read the bill at another time so that you can see that this is real stuff. And he's really old. And all the time that he's been in there, he's saying, and it's a whole bunch of Europeans and just a few quote unquote Black people, and they keep overlooking the bill. When someone's, I said I was going to get started, but let me just say this. When they spend millions of dollars on roots, and you think it's for one thing, first of all, understand that it is a level of an admission of guilt on record. This depiction that they're giving you, they're actually doing some of the work for you. So even though, yes, this is the damage that was done, this is the evidence of the damage that was done. So when you go in to have a real conversation, it's like you having your car totaled. It's apparent that your car is totaled. But when you call your insurance company, can anybody tell me who they call in? The appraiser. And they're going to come in and say, hey, yeah, this tar, you know what, it's worth this amount. This is, they analyze the car, they're gonna look at the damage, and they're gonna say, all right, this is how much we're gonna give you. This is the phase that we're in. No, I don't want to see. Oh, I don't want to see. I don't want to see. Turn it away. But now somebody talking about money, all of a sudden we perk up. I'm just saying. Anyway, let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. I'm not gonna keep you guys long today. All right. I took some time, energy, and effort to share this, and I hope you appreciate it. Let me go ahead and put it in the big form here. Full screen. 1 second. All right, it's not in full screen. 1 second. So this is Roots Remake. Is everybody there? I see people on Facebook, but I really don't hear you. And I'm trying to make this bigger so I can see. View and present. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Please bear with me here. These split screen business be bugging me out sometimes. Here we go. All right. That'll work for now. All right, here we go. Roots Remake 2016. So last episode, again, these episodes is really condensed. It's like 2 hours. It's a lot to process, but we're gonna forward now. Again, sponsored by the LEV Project, which is what you're listening to, Can Cultural Clothing, and the Soul Center, which will be coming soon. So basically, this is a little bit of feedback from the LEV Project to show that, again, once again, you know, people are, for those who want it, you know, it's like stores or products or whatever. Everything is not for everybody, but for those who desire it, for those who this is their part of their journey that they're on, this is a little bit of appreciation. So this was from Angel Bowles from yesterday's review. She says, I got to say this, many people touch me, but very few overwhelm me. This sister waters at the root, truly, no pun intended. What I mean by this is she feeds the essential in order to promote real growth. I have been growing with the LEV Project for 6 months. And this sister Angel, she's been with the LEV Project from day one, right? And she was one of them who was like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. I can't process it. Sending love to Sister Angel. And I've seen that growth and elevation in her. This is why I wanted to read this. It says, she says, I have been growing with the LEV Project for 6 months. Thanks to Sister Amuna, I have developed a passion to gain understanding of our past and present in order to promote a better future for us and those who will come behind us, meaning our children and our children's children. The narratives I have sought on my own. So she went from listening to the LEV Project to this appetite within her to know her history and learn more about herself. She went into doing that on her own. Hallelujah, I praise. This is the goal. This is the goal. So this is just a little praise report. But she says, the narratives I have sought on my own are beginning to take better shape as I listen to Amuna and those who have contributed to the knowledge of their studies and the voices of the LEV Project. One thing I heard in this review that speaks to why this knowledge and wisdom is so very important was in reference to a Mandingo warrior. And this is what Kunta was told in the narrative when he was getting trained to be a warrior. It says a warrior who is not prepared becomes a slave. Understand that. That was some Sister Angel Bowl. I just want to share that because people who are not prepared, people who don't understand the value of the past, people who think that it is not important to understand history will be doomed to repeat it. And if the historical value of understanding how we got in this situation ended up our foreparents in slavery, what do you think will happen if you don't know or understand the who, the what, the where, the what, and the why, or the when and the why, and how to avoid it? That was a little wisdom from Sister Angel. So as I always say, we're going to take this time to heal, and we're going to move through this real swift light. So basically, this aired yesterday. Again, I went through some of the social media objections. Why are they changing the storyline? I mean, we can't win for losing. Everybody has this emotional connection to the first Kunta Kinte. You know, James from Good Time was on there. You know, LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow was on there. And now things are changed. And everybody's like, why did they change it? You know, why didn't they just leave it the same? And they're saying that, hey, we added to it to make it more historically sound. Can't win for losing. Someone else said they're trying to blame Africans for slavery. I commented on this yesterday. In the beginning of chapter one, like I'm reading the book, right? In the beginning of the first episode, they gave a narrative. According to what I have read, and anybody else out there who have read anything else, please share with us. Please, I'm not the only one who's reading these narratives. There are quite a few people who've come through the LEV project who shared their love of these narratives. Have you come across anything, and feel free to share, that admits to the fact that other Africans, kings, nobility were complicit? There's an article that I have, and I have to give you guys the article because you know what he said? I can't remember, his name just flew right out of my head. It's going to come back. The Harvard professor who does the PBS specials. If anybody remembers his name, he did Henry Louis Gates. So sorry, it came back. He did a thing when he traveled back to Africa, and he got the admission of certain kings that said, yes, we were complicit, we profited, and we sold other neighboring people. Well, my research goes across the globe. So I happened upon this site in Ghana, this long thread, of which they are absolutely furious at the fact that Henry Louis Gates went and did that. And you have to take a look at that so that you can understand that a lot of people are in denial, not just the European. I'll leave it at that for now. I don't believe what they're saying. And the fact of the matter is, you don't have to believe what they're saying. You can check their sources. It's like we're watching this stuff and we're like, if I don't believe what they're saying, then no, check their sources. That's what we're doing. It's not entertainment, it's research. I'm just saying, I want to see more resistance from the slaves. That's from those who are not watching, because in this new narrative, they made the slaves resist, the enslaved individuals. We're going to see that Fiddler resisted, and this is how he lost his life. He stood up for himself. And to save Kunta and his young child, he put himself in harm's way. But before he went out, he said what he needed to say. Very interesting. We see Kizzy doing the same thing. But again, this is for people who just want to talk, but we don't want to watch. We don't want to accurately watch. We want to form an opinion, and that's not too wise. We form opinions of each other, of whatever, before we actually have the facts. And so we see that Kunta is resisting. We see that Kizzy is resisting when she's being taken and she's using her warrior training from her father to attack one of the slave masters, or whatever the case may be, or the owners who are transporting her. So again, and we don't need to watch Roots. That's another thing. And then here was a Twitter message. The person said, you people need to see Roots, but when do they learn about Mansa Musa and the empires of West Africa? They learn when we go get that information and share. Today, the playing field is level. There are people on YouTube and these different social media outlets that has more ratings than Nielsen. And everybody knows Nielsen. Nielsen is the rating system for the television. They have more ratings than Nielsen, the everyday individual. So why are we still waiting on someone else to tell your story? You tell it. It's having been no more accessible than right today. So you tell it. This is the thing of we coming out of victim mode and stepping into our power, coming out of why don't you, why didn't you, especially when it comes to knowing our history. You can read, you can speak, you share it. So I'm going to follow up and continue. Similarities. Is anybody, are y'all on Facebook? I know I see y'all popping in and popping out, and I can't see if I change the screen on YouTube. I'm not going to be able to see you guys. So just give me a ones up or a bless up or hello, greetings, how are you? So I know you guys are there and you rocking, you hearing it, and everything is all good. Similarities between slavery, indentured, and now. Do you realize that when we first came out, our foreparents first came out of slavery, more often than not, some stayed right on that same plantation, but this time, you know, they either sharecropped or they worked for food, clothes, and shelter. So nothing much changed except the fact that, and this is why even in today's vernacular, when people are going to the corporate world, they call it the plantation, because some of the same things are there. So if we don't understand what that did and what it's doing, and this is what Dr. Boyce Watkins always talks about, is getting off of that and stepping into that space of being your own boss and providing your own job opportunities for one another. But if we don't understand all of the dynamics, when someone does that, we look at them like, yeah, they're gonna fall soon. That ain't gonna work. Why? Because you still got the slave mind. So even though you got a little entrepreneurship in you, your brothers and sisters around you are like, they think they're better than us. Why? Because somebody has to go. So the cooperative economics, if we don't deal with the mentality, if we don't deal with the heart, if we don't deal with the injury and heal it, all it's gonna be like, oh, and this is why I have a elder here, and she has a Black-owned bookstore. And do you know how many Black-owned bookstores have closed around the country? Either for lack of support, finances, because the playing field really has not totally been leveled. So a lot of them have been closed across the country significantly over the years. But yet still, if we encourage one another, hey, get this business, do this thing, but we don't show up and we don't support, it's back to the corporate plantation. Keeping your employer's name. Again, when you still go to your employer, this is what people do. They keep the employer's name. When you go and you work at whatever, AT&T, or you work at Merrill Lynch, or you work at whatever, it's the same thing. You have to answer to, my name is such and such, employer of such and such. It's the same thing your foreparents went through. Whatever plantation they were on, that's the name that they carry. I'm just showing that not much has changed for those who keep saying blah, 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 as they go into their car and drive right back onto the corporate plantation or into these spaces where you still work for other people. Hiring out your labor for monetary gain, I already touched on that. That is something, and now you'll be begging, please hire me. They had hiring fairs. The history tells you about hiring fairs where they would beg good employers to please hire me because they didn't want the ones who are known to beat and abuse each other. So sometimes the masters who owned the slaves, but they did not have any work for them, they would hire them out and then get the money from the monies that was hired out. Understand, it's the same stuff that's going on. Only thing, somebody's not necessarily owning you at their physical location, but as it relates to work and employment, yeah. So we're going to continue. Hope you, and I'm quite sure you guys have more of the similarities and why it's important, why this conversation is still important in 2016. Kunta still held plans of escape. So after 10 years, and I'm getting into the actual meat and potatoes of episode 2. It said after 10 years, he still in his heart was like, yo, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to go. I got to get out of here. All of this time bubbling inside him was indifference, anger. You had to bite your tongue. How many people are on these places where you go to work and you see things and you have to bite your tongue? You go to the work cafeteria and you see things, you hear conversations, you can't say anything. That means your job. It's not physical chastisement now, it's financial chastisement. You're gonna be broke, you can't pay a car payment, you can't pay your rent, you can't buy things for your children. And so what do? You hear some madness and oftentimes you sit there. So the psychological game is still playing. A disassociation from the true self. You go into work, if you wear head wraps, you can't wear your head wraps. If you have your locks, we don't like the way your locks look. And then you see this pushback. You see this, what they call when you go into work, it's called the dress code. This is the dress code for when you want to work here. Then this is what we say you can do, and this is what we say you can't do. So yes, and we saw that with the young man in Louisiana, I believe it is, a few weeks ago, who was valedictorian, and because the school says you cannot have a beard, they took his cap and gown back. They took his cap and gown back and prohibited him from walking across the stage. So understand that this is nothing much really has changed as long as we're still in this post-slavery paradigm. It says, again, Revolutionary War, they added this in. I don't remember in the First Roots. And let me just say, I watched the First Roots a lot of times. Let me just say, when we went to Ethiopia, before we left, I had bought the Roots DVD. And TV is not like it is now. You have to have satellite and all those things like this. And so Roots was one of the things that we watched over and over and over again, in addition to how much time I saw it in America. So understand, this Revolutionary War part, they're showing you if you caught it, they're showing you about the Ethiopian regiment. So this is a little thing that I found online concerning Lord Dunmore that they're talking about in Roots was an actual man. This was happening in 1755. Royal Governor of Virginia, he issued a proclamation offering freedom to all slaves of the revolutionaries who were willing to join him under arms against the rebels in the American Revolutionary War. And so in the story, in the narrative, Kunta is running away and he's going to the troops of Lord Dunmore so that he can get freedom. Okay? For those who are like, why do we gotta watch it? Understand the dynamics of what is going on. And what was funny is when they did not give them, even though they said, hey, we're going to give you something, but we're really not going to give you the proper tools. And so come to them is like, yo, what kind of spear is this? Y'all got guns, you giving us spears? And the man replies to him, if you want your freedom, you fight with what we give you. So we're analyzing the mentality that, yes, we know it's not an accurate, it's not fair what we're doing, but you're going to have to accept what we give you. Yes, Queen, show me your hammer. You hit that nail on the head. Kevin, big up yourself, Kevin Vaughn. Big up yourself. And we're glad you're here, Kevin. Glad you're here. This is the review. You know, this is a little deeper review. So for those who want surface, you know, understandable. Much love to you guys. But we're going to go in deep because there's a lot to extract here. Thank you, Kevin. It says fighting at a different disadvantage. So they fought at a disadvantage, and when Kunta realized that, he was like, yeah, no, we're not in the same boat. And he says to the other brother that he met there, he says, we don't fight for the English, we're going to fight for ourselves. So sometimes, and this has happened in history, we take on, and this happened in the Civil War as well, because the European is having a fight and it looks like we, the people, can benefit from it. You give into it, only realizing that it wasn't really about you in the first place. And that kind of plays out in the end. But let me continue. We want plant in our children. Kunta uses his man. Right. Kunta uses manhood training. I talked a lot about manhood training in the last one. But again, what you plant within your children will come out at the time of need. And so what his foreparents planted in him, when he went into battle, that's what he used to survive. Because you see his army mate, he died. And one thing about the army mate is that you're going to see the slave brutality. When they cut off Kunta's foot, that's not all that they did. If you watch closely, the army mate had on an eye patch. And what did he say? He said they burned his eye when he cried because they sold his sister and his mother. And so this show of emotion, this show of attachment, this show of actually having a family, and he cried, the master burned his eye, and this is why his eye looked like that. These are some real events. Whether or not they wove it into this narrative does not take away from the fact that many slaves were punished in this way. Kunta's garment said liberty to freedom, but here's the irony. The poor white Europeans who were pursuing him, these slave catchers, a lot of times they were illiterate. You saw that in Underground as well. They were illiterate, and so he didn't even know what it said. But he was pursuing someone who understood what it meant. And so he laughed because they understood that, the Europeans understood that this whole system was built on the backs of enslaved peoples. And without them in place, the whole system would crumble. This is what the South was really afraid of. The North was in it, but the North gave it up way earlier. But the South was holding on to it because they were the people who was producing. And those producers were enslaved individuals. So understand, like I said, it's about economy, and then they equaled in the race factor after. So let's not buy into the race paradigm. It is present, but when we buy into it and not seeing it for what it was, a tool, basically, you understand, to oppress, to separate, to divide, to conquer, and we can begin to get beyond it so that we can really understand what happened and, you know, not buy into the things that have been told us. So let me go on, because I have a little tidbit from the Revolutionary War, right? I know you might be asking, who is this? I know you can't see it on thing, but I'll give you the link. This is Mom Bet. How many people have heard of Mom Bet? Her name is Elizabeth Freeman. All of this, most of this is so readily accessible, it's ridiculous. Let me just say that. We just have to have the desire to want to know. Mom Bet was a slave, an enslaved individual who sued for her freedom in and around the time of the Revolutionary War. So let me go ahead. It says it was a little bit after. Mom Bet known as Elizabeth Freedom. Yesterday we learned about Elizabeth Grimstead Key, and seems like Elizabeth was a name that they liked, but she was a little known hero. So we're like, what about this person? What about that person? When we speak about them, we bring them back. We give them life again. We educate our youth. Stop expecting everybody else to do it. So she's a little known national hero and a symbol of courage and spirit to all who strive for freedom. She was among the first slaves in Massachusetts to sue for and win her freedom. Born in slavery in 1742, she was given to the Ashley family of Sheffield, Massachusetts. So anybody out there who wants to learn more about Mom Bet, make a little miniseries, a little documentary. If each of us take a piece of this, guess what? We're going to have more diverse history. It says, in her early teens, during her period of enslavement to them, she married and had a child, Betsy. In 1780, Mrs. Ashley struck at Betsy with a heated shovel, but Bet shielded her daughter, received a deep wound in her arm in the process, but left this wound uncovered as it healed, as evidence of her harsh treatment. For me, this story is twofold, but I'm going to continue. She didn't cover it up. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want you to see it. I don't want to identify with it. Mom Bet left the womb open so that it can heal, but it was evidence of the harsh treatment. Remember what I said earlier when I first started, that this is evidence, and they're spending millions of dollars to document evidence. But let's continue. Soon after the Revolutionary War, Bet heard the Massachusetts Constitution read aloud in the Ashley's home. So these Europeans were very daring then and now, not all, but some, because I'm going to go into why I say not all, but some. And so they would say and speak things in front of the slaves because they felt you were ignorant. Our foreparents were ignorant. They won't know what we're talking about anyway. It's like speaking in front of a child because you think they have any sense. So there's a level of ego that was in play, but I'm going to continue. All men, this is what she heard them reading, Article 1. All men are born free and equal and have certain natural and essential and unalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and fine, that of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. Now remember, the Revolutionary War is about what? America did no longer, that's like 50 million double negatives, excuse me. America did not want to be in debt and have to pay homage to the crown in England. And they're fighting. America is like the teenage child who was like, I don't want to be under your rule on more. You know, I'm here. This is my joint and I'm a big person. And so that's what they did. They fought this war. You understand? And the British, that's where the whole British are coming and everything like this. And so after they declared it, they declared, hey, this is the Constitution. And we deserve life, liberty, and the freedom of happiness. Check it. Bet recognized the potential legal and moral impact of these words and sought out an attorney to sue for her freedom under the newly ratified state constitution. What? Mom Bet sued for her freedom, went to an attorney, but I thought everybody had the same slave experience. It says, excuse me, sometimes I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna behave myself. It says, with the help of Theodore Sedgwick, a Stockbridge attorney and abolitionist, she pled her case in court of the common pleas in Great Barrington in August 1781. Remember, we read about Elizabeth Keys. Snoop needs to hear you teach on our heritage. You're awesome. Bless up yourself, Angela Ann Watson. Yeah, Snoop needs to have a conversation because the series Book of Negroes and the Root series is the most for all people of color. In order for you to know where you're going, you have to know where you, and I agree, Tiffany. And we don't want to know. We're like, we don't want to see. We don't want to look back. Stop. Come on. Make we do better. Let's do better. We read about Elizabeth Key. What happened yesterday? Elizabeth Key sued for her freedom. She won in Virginia and they changed the laws. Mom Bet is in Massachusetts and she's suing for her freedom. It says, when the jury ruled in Bet's favor, she became the first African-American woman to be set free under the Massachusetts Constitution. Her case, and you can look it up, Brom versus and Bet versus Ashley, which was her employers. So she sued her employers, right? Served as a precedent in the state Supreme Court case that brought an end to the practice of slavery in Massachusetts. So let me sit up myself here. A black woman, I say quote, a melanated woman, Mom Bet, yes.
Abolitionist is someone that doesn't believe in
That's my daughter. She says an abolitionist is someone who doesn't believe in slavery. That's the 8-year-old. Amuna is just not fronting. She says, hi. This is something that our children need to know. You can't expect school to teach them. You have to teach them. So her case, Brom and Bet versus Ashley, served as precedent in the state Supreme Court case that brought an end to the practice of slavery in Massachusetts. Let's continue. Go ahead. As a free woman, Bet took the name Elizabeth Freeman. She worked as a governess in the Sedgwick household until the Sedgwick children were grown. Didn't I tell you oftentimes when they was free, you still had to go and look for employment? And then she and Betsy bought and moved into their own house, which is her daughter, in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where she was widely recognized and in demand for her skills as a healer, midwife, and nurse. Elizabeth Freeman, or Mom Bet, died in 1829 and is buried in the Stockbridge Cemetery. She remains an inspiration to all of us who work for a world in which we are free and safe. If you want to know more about Mom Bet, Elizabeth Freeman, check her out, because like I said, I keep saying we have to do the work. They're giving you some people are visual. So they're giving you the visual, but please don't stop there. Let me continue. Everything would not be handed to us in history. Like I said, it's so expansive. If we want an understanding, we have to seek. So many slaves rebelled in so many ways, like we just saw. Ma Bet, she was like, you know what? And when you read the story of Ma Bet, it's actually deeper than that, because she went around and people would ask her what happened to your hand. And she was like, ask Miss Ashley. You got to read the story. She's like, yo, ask her, son, what happened to my hand? So she went around letting everybody see, and everybody's like, that's what's happening in the world today. The world is looking. This is why a group last year came to the UN, and they're like, wow, America, what did you really do? You're going to have to, they demanding reparations. If you didn't see that article, check that article out, because now it's uncovered. This is why it's so important. But anywho, Roots Imagine spoke to some of those. Original movie aired at a different time and social acceptance of certain things. Meaning in the 70s, it was a different space and time. They didn't curse to the degree that they do on TV today. They don't say certain things like they do today. So it's a different space and time. Reimagine means it's updated. And the reality is the children today, like I think our episode T.I. is in there. So for people who understand, and children who identify with T.I., they're going to watch it, because now the characters that are in there, you know them. Like no one, unless you're from that time or you watch TV Land, you're not going to know James from Good Times. For that space and time, when you saw James from Good Times, you're like, chill, that's James from Good Times. But today, the children are like, James from Good Times, who's that? You understand? And so I understand why there was a need. It's like clothes that go out of fashion and come back in. They're not going to use the very same fabric. They're going to use the same pattern and bring back the clothes again. Again, the capturing of slaves. There were many punishments for the capturing of slaves. Kunta's punishment was not unusual, and I'm going to go into that a little bit right now. Cutting off of Kunta's foot were made eye burn, and his war made eye burned out. Slave punishments. Go that way. It says, and some things are not for children. You just see me tell her go that way, because again, you have to temper everything. It says here, I'm reading a little bit about what they would do. So many people would do different things. A doctor, and this is, I got a little excerpt and I have the link. It says, James Ramsey, a doctor working for several sugar plantation in St. Kitts. Again, I'm using Roots as a springboard. So for instance, I say, okay, this is not an anomaly. Let's find out what was some of the slave punishments so we could get an understanding of what they used, X, Y, and Z. So when we see it, we're just like, oh, I can't believe that this happened to Kunta. No, it happened to a lot more people than Kunta. And we are doing our foreparents and our ancestors an injustice by not identifying that this happened to more than one person just because you see them on the screen and everybody else is voiceless. That's like only giving voice to one person. James Ramsey, a doctor working for several sugar plantations in St. Kitts, was shocked by the way the slaves were treated by overseers. So this James Ramsey person is shocked. Ramsey later recalled in his book, take notes, write this book down, essay on the treatment and conversion of African slaves in the British sugar colonies, 1784. I'll say it again, essay on the treatment and conversion of African slaves in the British sugar colonies. James Ramsey. The ordinary punishment of slaves for the common crimes of neglect, absence from work, eating the sugar cane, maybe they were hungry, theft, are cart whipping, beat with a stick, sometimes to the breaking of bones. The chain, an iron crook around the neck, a ring around the ankle, and confinement in the dungeon, like threw them in jail. It says there have been instances of slitting of ears, breaking of limbs, so as to make an amputation necessary, like we saw on the boat scene where they just chopped off the man's hand, beating out of eyes, like we saw with the war mate, and castration. In short, in the place of decency, sympathy, morality, and religion, slavery produces cruelty and oppression. This is a European person. Not everyone was in the mindset that this is correct, even at that time, and we're going to go into it. So this person is saying, in short, in the place of decency, sympathy, morality, and religion, slavery produces cruelty and oppression. It is true that the unfeeling application of the ordinary punishments ruins the Constitution and shortens the life of many a poor wretch. This is one of the words that they were calling. That word agitates me, but let me continue. It says, where are we here? I'm sorry, guys. Wait, let me go back. The law provides slaves with virtually no protection from their masters. If you realize in the Roots movie when Kunta was driving the wagon and he was like, you know, oh, you love the daughter kind of like you own because the man was having an affair. And one of the time Kunta was like, I would tell on you. And he was like, who will believe you? That's on the books. On the books, man. One of the book I was reading, The Diary of a Georgia Plantation owner. So I can't remember the name right now. Ann Kemble, sorry. She says that the masters, they had a culture, don't believe a slave, slaves are liars. So a slave could not testify against their master in court. And this is what they're talking about. You have no protection because you couldn't even go to court to necessarily, but we do see in Elizabeth's case that she did it and won. But you're talking about a different culture from the South and the North. The South had a totally different culture as slavery went on. You could have done it earlier on, but when it was at the thick of antebellum slavery, some of these things, they made sure that you couldn't go into court and testify. So it says you had no protection against your master. On large plantations, this power was delegated to overseers. We see that in the narrative. These men were under considerable pressure from the plantation owner to maximize profits. So this is why when the woman dies, and I'm kind of jumping a little bit, when the woman dies 7 months pregnant, and he was like, yo, I thought I told you don't put this woman in the field. They would put women in the field at 7 months, 8 months, 9 months pregnant, especially at harvest time. And so in her case, she was from overexertion, she dies in labor. And he's saying it's coming out of your pocket. So again, it was all about money. That was the ultimate bottom line for them. It says, they did this by bullying the slaves into increasing productivity, meaning if you didn't meet quota when you showed up with your bag, they want to know how much did you pick. It's kind of like if you work at a call center. They want to make how many calls did you make? How long did you go to the bathroom? When did you come back? It's still happening today. Like literally you're chained to your desk. I used to work at one, right? And if you get up, you were in the bathroom for 7 minutes and 30 seconds. That's way beyond the amount of time that it takes to urinate and wash your hands. I've been making my teens sit and watch it with me. There you go, Tamara. I agree. Let them see it because they need to understand. They really need to understand. It says the punishment, thank you, Tamara. The punishment used against judge to be under performing included the use of whip, which was norm. You know, 39, there was a lingo that I find in the narratives, 30 and 9. That's their lingo. That's the minimum. If you do something wild and crazy, they're going to give you 30 and 9 minimum. Okay. And if according to them, you didn't even have to, there was some vigilante type stuff where somebody could just accuse you, no witnesses, no judges, literally you just get ganged and then they take you out and execute you. It was some real off the chain type stuff. Sometimes slave owners resorted to mutilating and branding their slaves. William Box Brown, a slave in Richmond, which we are reading this right now. Actually, this came right in the middle of our last installment of this book. A slave in Richmond later wrote about an overseer on his tobacco plantation. Stephen Bennett, who had a wooden leg and used to creep up behind the slaves to hear what they had to talk about in his absence. but his wooden leg generally betrayed him by coming into contact with something which would make a noise. So everybody did not work in the field. And Henry Box Brown, and this is I showed it before. Sorry, 1 second here. Henry Box Brown is and they actually have a children edition as well. I can't get it out right now. I'll get it out in a minute. So he actually worked in a factory. It says here, and that word factory, by the way, when you do the research, what I found out, that's where in Africa too, they had factories where they would have the goods, the rum, the trinkets, the guns, and what they would exchange for slaves. And so the factors would be in the factory. And I thought that was deep. But anyway, it says it says here, and that would call the attention of the slaves to what he was about. He was a very mean man in all his ways and was very much disliked by the slaves. He used to whip them, often in a shameful manner. On one occasion, I saw him take a slave whose name was Pickney and made him take his shirt off. And then he tied his hands and gave him 100 lashes on his bare back. And all this because he lacked 3 pounds of his task, which was valued at 6 cents. So these quotas in certain jobs where you're on commission and they chastise you and you lose your rights. This is the same stuff that has always been going on. But this is when they were in the space to physically chastise you. And Oladu Equiano, which is another narrative, we haven't gotten to it yet. It says, blame brutal overseers for the worst treatment of slaves. And quote, another Negro man was half hanged and then burnt for attempting to poison a cruel overseer. Thus, by repeated cruelties are the wretched first urged to despair and then murdered, because they still retain so much of human nature about them as to wish to put an end to their misery and retaliate on their tyrants. This was some of the retaliation, poisoning, doing certain things. It says these overseers are indeed, for the most part, persons of worst character. Overseers were oftentimes from the lower class of the European, like Irish, which was one of the ones we see depicted, and they were poor and they felt like, hey, if you're the only one that I could oppress, then you're who I'm going to oppress. So they were really oftentimes really, really brutal. The master didn't, when he was on a big temptation, he didn't want to do it. And when they would hire black overseers, oftentimes the narrative said these black overseers, quote unquote, were more brutal than the white ones because they had a point to prove to master. It says, where are we? These overseers are indeed, for the most part, persons of worst character of any denomination of men in the West Indies. Unfortunately, many humane gentlemen, but not resided on their estates, are obliged to leave the management of them in the hands of these human butchers. You had a lot of absentee masters in the West Indies, where my parentage is from, and where they were dropped off. So you had a lot of absentee ones. They would come, they would set up the joint, but they wouldn't be there. And so the overseers would have to write. There was no email, no phones. They would have to write with issues. So oftentimes they had more power in their hands to do more madness. It says here, unfortunately, many humane gentlemen, but not residing on their estates, are obliged to leave the management of them in the hands of these women butchers who cut and mangle the slaves in a shocking manner or the most trifling occasions, and altogether treat them in every respect like brutes. Why am I reading this? So that we can say that, and we can understand that Kunta's situation is not one-off. This was the culture. Some punishments were associated with certain areas. William Wells Brown argues that slaveholders in Virginia smoked slaves. In his fits of anger, he would take up a chair and throw it at a servant. And in his most rational moments, when he wished to chastise one, he would tie them up in the smokehouse and whip them, after which he would cause a fire to be made of tobacco stems and smoke them. Some slaves, we read another one that the slave, he waterboarded the slaves. One in 50 Years in Chains, they said he didn't beat them, he waterboarded them. Like he would put them under the faucet and let it drip and make them feel like they're actually drowning. Again, there was no across the board, this is how you discipline. It was however sadistic the individual was or not, because you had some individuals who never beat a slave. They may have psychologically or emotionally tormented one, but they never physically beat one. This is, like I said, it's this degrees to this thing. People don't like to hear it, but when we step out of, when we want to know the truth, I want to know the truth. I'm a truth seeker. So hopefully those who are here are truth seekers. Take some of the notes of these names, look them up, find their narrative and read it. It says here, Moses Roper claimed that in South Carolina, they used to drive nails into hog shed so as to leave the point of the nail just protruding in the inside of the casket. Into this, he used to put his slaves for punishment and roll them down a very long, steep hill. Harriet Jacobs, we read that narrative collectively in the beginning of the year, a slave in Edenton, North Carolina. By the way, let me tell you something about Harriet Jacobs, and I'm going to come to Mary. 1 second, Tamara. Harriet Jacobs, her story came out after the Civil War. Her story came out at the beginning of the Civil War. This is what the history says on it, right? Again, there's documentary, there's news, there's all this stuff that we can see. This is the stuff that got like 200 views on YouTube. And people are like, why don't they talk about it? They are talking about it. It has 200 views on YouTube. Nobody's watching it. Anywho, there was a woman, a European woman, who she is the one who's responsible for bringing back Harriet Jacobs' story, because in 1861, the Civil War kicks off. And what you have to understand, what I learned about these slave narratives is, then the time when abolition is rising, more and more slaves, enslaved individuals, especially those who are running to freedom, are encouraged to tell their story. So this is how at one time we're getting hundreds of these stories. And Harriet Jacobs' story was one of them. What happened with her is her story got covered over with the whole Civil War. And after freedom, nobody really, they didn't really need these abolition stories anymore. But there's this European who took it up because they were trying to say Harriet Jacobs' story was fiction. And this European woman, I'm working on my names, but her name escapes me. She went on a journey to prove that Harriet Jacobs' story is not fiction and that she is an actual woman and this actually took place. And this is how in the 70s, when around the time when roots and all of these things are coming in and people want to know about their culture, Harriet Jacobs' story re-enters the literary stream. I've been trying to find out who we were owned by. Their Irish last name, McCurty, but you have to pay for everything. It seems like we actually have their pictures sitting on my aunt's table. This is from Tamara. And they also marked the slaves by the marks from the whips that they were left. Yeah, they would. This is how they would identify. And we see that with Kunta. When they ran him down, they give a description. Oh, his back looks like such and such. And this is what the slave catcher does. He picks up his thing and he says, oh, yeah, it's you. So thank you for that, Tamara. And I hope you do find more about your family history. There's, what I found too, and I'm going to go to Harriet Jacobs. If you know where the person was, there's some town records that you can necessarily find that you would have to probably do the footwork. I interviewed a brother. His name is Lewis. His name is JC Hughes, and he did the footwork, and it's on my channel as well. He did the footwork, and he came to us when we were reading this book. And when we were reading this book, 30 Years a Slave, and come to find out doing his research, he found out that this was one of his great-great-great-grandparents how many times removed. So it's definitely doable, but you just have to put a lot of footwork in there. So thank you so much for that. It says Harriet Jacobs, a slave in Edenton, North Carolina, explained in her book, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, 1861. There was a planter in the country not far from us who had 600 slaves. And thank you everybody who's sticking with us. Like I said, we're going to go a little bit deeper. So please bear with us, drink some water as I'm about to do right now. But, what we have to go beyond the surface. It says there was a planter in the country not far from us who had 600 slaves, many of whom he did not know by sight. So this guy has 600 slaves, okay? It says his extensive plantation was managed by well-paid overseers. There was a jail and a whipping post on his grounds, and whatever cruelties were perpetuated there, they passed without comment, meaning No one dealt with this. You're welcome, Tamara. I appreciate you tuning into the conversation as well. This guy was beyond. Yo, so this master, he had 600 slaves and he did whatever he wanted to. It says, he was so effectively screened by his great wealth that he was called to no account for his crimes. Sounds familiar? Not even for murder. Sounds familiar? We're all in outrage. Oh, and our foreparents will be looking at us like, why are you outraged? Nothing much has changed. This is, okay, baby, put it there. I'll show it to them. The baby wanted to, this is one for children. You know, some of the older ones, my baby just brought me this. This is one that children could read. If you have older children, you know, in middle school, 40 acres and maybe a mule. So they took some real life accounts and they made it into something that children could read and relate to, for them to have a working understanding of, and it's by Harriet Jacobs. So the baby just bought me this book. She's not a baby, I call her them baby. But he was so affectionately screened by his great wealth that he was called to no account for his crimes, not even murder. Various were the punishments resorted to. A favorite one was to tie a rope around a man's body and suspend him from the ground. A fire was kindled under him from which he was suspended a piece of fat pork. As this cooked, the scalding drops of fat continually fell on the bare flesh. My point of reading all of this is it was a culture, like we read earlier, of violence and cruelty. It's documented so that it can be measured. And so that when people talk about reparations, and when you talk about assessing the damage, and when you talk about epigenetics, and when you talk about what is wrong with Black people today, we have something tangible. We have references, because this is how they deal in the world of references and everything. They want it traceable, and we have it. But do we know it is the question. Thank you for sticking with me. I'm almost finished here. I know I'll be going long on this stuff. Okay, Lewis Clark. And again, you can read this as it goes on. But this is some of the stuff that, like I said, I give the reference here. I'm going to continue. Enslaved held on to certain knowledge after injury. So Belle, she nurses back Kunta to health with her herbal remedies, of which we lost. When the enslaved, our enslaved foreparents, they understood some things. Although they were in this position, many didn't totally let go of themselves. But once you were accepted and assimilated, we oftentimes let go of those things and began to believe the very person who first oppressed you. And this is that pathology. This is that mental issue that we have. So now when the doctor says, hey, you know, don't take this thing that I concocted, we're like, the doctor said it, so it must be true. And our foreparents, she said, you know, this ain't what they said to give you. This is what I know to give you. And we kind of lost that. And some of us are returning, but we have to look at how we have been convinced that the things that we know, things that are natural, are not right for us. Why was that done? And why are we still buying into that thought process and paradigm? So when we talk about coming back and building growth, and we have to undo these layers, because it is layers. One more thing. Because of harsh conditions, many people's soul will cleave onto mother figures, father figures, brothers. Have you noticed we don't know each other, and we see one another, we be like, hey, what's up, brother? What's up, sister? You know, somebody elder than you might call them mother, grandmother, as a sign of respect. A lot of times during slavery, they called it fictive kingship. And today you call it play cousin. That's not my real cousin, that's my play cousin. So, but this was an actual reality. We see it with Kunta and Belle and Fiddler. Fiddler became like his father. So when he died, that tore him up, because Fiddler was his father in this fictive kinship conversation. It says here, many African immigrants replaced their absent extended family with fictive kinships, members of the same ethnic and national community who played a role that family would play at home. And so this is the effects Like we're saying, oftentimes we're disconnected from those who are really our family and gravitate towards those who we project or we desire to be our family, or be like the grandmother you always wanted, or that cousin you always wanted, or whatever the case may be. It says here they would, like we saw Fiddler play integral role at weddings and births and graduations and things of this nature. Facebook just went out, but I'm gonna finish this up. Bell nurses Kunta when environment was no longer conducive. She displayed ABWS. I wrote a book called Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited. And I wrote this book because today when they say, oh, tell me about slavery, I don't want to hear it. But yet still we want to talk about the angry black woman, right? Hold on once. We want to talk about the angry black woman who is a problem in society, who we don't understand why she is the way she is, and this, that, and the third. I wrote this book, Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited, because, like I said in the book, certain people, many people, Michelle Obama, anybody, any woman who speaks up, sorry, of melanated complexion, she's considered angry black woman. We see this displayed in, and again, demonized only for melanated people. Others, it is acceptable. So Belle is displaying a little bit this. She's goading Kunta. She's insulting him. She's dismissing him. She's verbally attacking him in an attempt to try to get him to get up and start walking again. But they have taken this angry black narrative, angry black woman narrative from slavery, from not looking at the conditions, not looking at the oppression, not looking at all that she's been through. They're taking it to say, airlifting it and saying you're just angry because you have a bad attitude. And what's happening is that we as a people buy into this, men buy into this, women buy into this, and we need to know that this is coming from a far place. This is some of the reasons why understanding our history is very important. Okay, I spoke much about the woman, the field. Oh, one more thing about that, the grieving process. As we saw in the situation when the woman fell down and she died, and to give birth, there was no grieving process. So that grief you carried with you even until today. And this is why a lot of the reasons why we don't want to deal with what's going on, because you carry the grief with you. You had to get on to work as usual. All right, get away, nothing to see here, bury her, let's go back to work. Everything was work, 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 work. There wasn't a chance to process, to grieve, to actually healthily heal. And it's kind of like that today. Every other minute something is happening and people are disheartened. But let me continue. No one was your own. Children, husband, wives, mothers, fathers, everybody was in danger of being torn or sold away from you. And if they were being beaten or manhandled or abused, you couldn't do anything. You were powerless. How did that affect the psyche? How did that affect the mind? We can say overall PTSD or post-traumatic slave syndrome, but now we're going actually into the things that are happening as we're seeing on the screen. And this is why a lot of people are looking away, because we don't want to be able to say, you know what, this is what happened. This is how it's making me feel. How do I get beyond this? Fiddler says he decided not to marry because he didn't want to have to deal with being torn away. Bell says and snaps at Kunta saying he doesn't know her. He doesn't know her mind. And this is that separation, because everybody's in their little compartments. Everybody's afraid to love. Everybody's afraid to embrace, because at any minute you are in this fight or flight mode. You're in this survival mode. And at any minute, this person who you love, who you care for, could be used against you as a weapon. Kunta says, as his coping mechanism, I close my heart, only way to stay strong. He cared for no one. Let me make sure here that I have not, I'm going to release the presenting. I'm not done, but I'm going to release it for 1 second just so that I can check on everybody on YouTube here and make sure everything is good. Make sure I haven't missed any questions. 1 second. We're almost finished here. I want to thank you for sticking with us. Make sure I haven't missed any questions. All right. Yes, true. Do you agree with the movie Roots? I hear you well, but no visual on the screen. Oh, no visual all this time? I agree with the opportunity for knowledge from all sources. Greetings, audio good, screen is black. YouTube, no screen. Hello, sister. Haven't been able to catch the episodes. Oh boy. So all this time the screen is back. All right, let me big up yourself, Rebel Natty. Let me I thought y'all was seeing the screen, so y'all was kind of like those on Facebook. Let me see if you guys could see the screen now. The screen is kind of my notes, you know, but you know, you can see my notes too. Hold on one second. Let me go back to my notes here. Yeah, hopefully you guys can see my screen now. Sorry about that. That was my notes still, so you guys were kind of hearing me and it was all good. It says, again, love during slavery was dangerous. It was used as a weapon or emotional warfare. Today, we still look at each other like that to a certain degree oftentimes. It's dangerous to love. How do we get beyond that? Our connections sometimes is very touch and go. You understand what I'm saying? Because we had to readjust really quickly. You could have a best friend tomorrow, like Kizzy. Tomorrow, your best friend is gone. How do you deal with that? And then you are forced to move on. If you moping around, if you're looking sad, if you're looking like you're really not liking this whole what I'm doing to you, like I said yesterday, they had a thought process and a culture that you had to be abused and like it. Like I always say, it's like being in a relationship with a narcissist. It's like domestic abuse. This is what slavery was. It was a domestic abuse situation. Why? Because you lived where they lived. That is domestic. You understand? And they were an integral part of your everyday life. You saw them every day. You interacted with them every day, with the oppressor, with the master, with the slave driver, with your family. And that dynamic of being so close is what is more of a domestic abuse situation. And so, yeah, I'm gonna continue. During the marriage ceremony, this is right in their faces. Actually, Fiddler says, even if he part you tomorrow, who's the he, the oppressor, the family, whoever, you will still love each other. So this is always in the forefront of the mind. That's what Kunta said. He said, hey, a child born here is just a slave. So understand that as you have levels of yourself in that base root chakra of where you feel safe, of where you feel grounded, of where you feel rooted, this is where we as a people are injured. That right to be here, that survival, you know, this is where a lot of addictions come out of. And so on a soul level, in the diaspora, not just in America, this is right now we're talking about American slavery, but it's not just in America, throughout the Caribbean, South America, North America, we see this root level injury that we have endured. And oftentimes, this is why we can't get past here. It says, Kunta interrogates. Now, this is funny. I thought it was like they had a little comic relief. Kunta's like, where did you get this jumping of the broom stuff from? And they're like, it's African custom because they're trying to hold on to any little remnant. And he was like, I ain't never seen that. I thought that was funny. I don't know if anybody else thought that was funny. But then Fiddler answers and says, and he rightfully says, every culture is not the same in Africa, which is true. So Kunta's culture, where he came from, this is why I said yesterday, everybody's not the same people as it relates to cultures, customs, and traditions. Kunta may have never seen it, but in another village, in another place, and that's why they keep calling him Guinea Man. A lot of places they got you from Guinea, they got you from the Gold Coast, they got you from Nigeria. It depends on where they got you from. And one narrative we read was like on the slave ships, they would give those who came from the culture of liking rice, they would give them rice. And those who came from the culture of eating a lot of yam in the diet, they would give them yam. And that's just to show you that even the slave capturers knew that there were different cultures. Some people were known for warriors. Some other ones were known for agriculture. Some were known for, you know, fine work or whatever the case may be. They knew that, and they actually wrote down where you came from, where they got you from. And this is where we get the whole Mandingo warrior type conversation, because certain people were known for certain things. And just to show you that your life was not your own, on your wedding day, the masters called Kunta and he couldn't say, I'm not coming. You could not say, I'm not coming into work today. I'm tired. I'm this and that. If you did, it would be under punishment in many cases, not all cases, but many cases. And also to keep in mind, we're talking about slavery in the South. A lot of places, slavery in the North didn't have a lot of plantations. most parts of the year it was cold, especially further north. So a lot of the slaves in the north were more like house slaves or factory slaves. Two totally different type of slavery, all slavery institution, but for further edification, we have to go a little bit further in. So again, the condition outside, like what we have today, angry men that come into the household because they can't provide, because they can't protect, because they're in a situation that emasculates them. We saw that in the movie when he came in, and that anger and resentment that he had towards the master brought into his house. And this is what oftentimes causes a lot of issues amongst us because of the oppressive state that we are still in externally. So, oh, here's one more fact. Men were more likely to run. And you see that related, like I said, they're illustrating what is written. Men were the ones who mostly ran, the reason being just what Bell said. Children get you in trouble on the run. Children cry. Children will get you caught. So they often thought about their children. The women did. And so you had a lot of plantations where it was really matriarchy. You would have, because the men were often driven harder, but the women were also driven. But the women were more valuable and prized in the eyes of the overseer because they produced more slaves. And so this is also important to note and understand as well. I didn't expect Kunta to say that he hates this country and declares that it will never be his home. I don't remember him saying it in the other episode. So that one was just something that I just wanted to note, but I'll continue because we're almost done. Education was a threat and crime punishable by violence. I'll say that again. I actually started off the LEV project by saying and doing a series of things of the punishments that they have, whether it be fines to the European or the free quote unquote black person, as well as 30 and 9 lashes and plus for catching you to read. Today, a lot of our people don't like to read. I understand it when we're talking about things that have been passed down from generation to generation. It also lends to the understanding of why a lot of our people put everything on education and think that it's only education that you need to get you to where you got to go. So we have two extremes to this: education, 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 and we miss the other parts of the puzzle. Or I totally don't like education. Let me remain in my ignorance. And because maybe down in your line, you had a foreparent who was punished for learning to read. And again, I know it sounds crazy to some people, but just look up the term epigenetics and you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. Walking on eggshells to appease oppressors. Power trip. So basically the ruling class was on a power trip. It was about more than money, mostly about money, but as well as about ego and control. And you have to imagine the foreparents, and we saw that in Kunta's situation with a little girl, Missy, keep running up, taking his child. But he can't say nothing because even in that space and time, the child had more cred than him. And she could represent him being whipped, maimed, sold, or whatever if she goes off and tells a lie. You also see that the little girl is violating Kizzy. When Kizzy grows up and Kizzy is older and she's giving her the present, she violates her to say, I can take a look at you. I can do whatever I want to you because I own you, mind, body, and soul. We still see that thought process today. And regarding Kizzy, one thing about the birthdays, a lot of the slaves testified to they didn't know them, and many others did know. So some people didn't know how old they were. In this case, once the women came to a certain age, the first thing the master is looking for is to breed you like an animal. This breeding thought is still oftentimes in our mind. You want to know why? Because A, we know that they had breeding farms. B, we know that it had nothing to do with relationships. So let's tie this breeding mentality into childhood pregnancy today, because this is what we're going to have to start doing, looking at the things that have been done and looking how historically they have come down to through the line and what they look like in today's space and time. Sorry. LEV project review. Scenes where Kizzy and Missy run off into the woods. When you saw Kizzy and Missy run off into the woods, and they saw these Europeans in there telling the people, the slaveholders, that they was going to go to hell and they, you know, they should not do what they're doing. Don't just think that, oh, see, they just put that in there. That wasn't even true. It was true. They had Quakers that were on record And this is one of them. And the reason why I bring him up, because they say George Fox is the founder of the Quakers, or the Religious Society of Friends. He was a rebel, a religious rebel. And I'm just going to go through, but you can look him up, coming from Britain. And he founded what was later called the Quakers. And they did not believe in holding slaves. So when you're looking in this scene, you will see George Fox, his believers, so to say. And so this is why they're telling the people, and these is who became the abolitionists, these same Quakers. Back in 1657, I'm not going to read the whole thing because we run it so long. In 1657, but you can check it out, to friends beyond the sea that have blacks and Indian slaves. So he writes a letter in 1657 to tell them to let go. Right. And it's in, correct. It's in my baby's book as well. George Fox. Correct. And so in 1657, he writes this letter to tell them that they should not be holding slaves. And they have actually a lot of meetings and letters that they wrote. Sorry. So check that out if you are interested. I'm going to continue here. I think we're almost at the end. This was my key phrase right here. When Kizzy says reading is my way of being a warrior because I'm free inside. Her father was like, yo, this reading thing is going to get you in trouble. You can't let them know because they're going to punish you. And she was like, yo, this is my way of expanding my mind. This is my way of living beyond my current situation and knowing that there are possibilities by tapping into words, because words have energy and energy brings life. And so she felt alive when she was reading these things. So Missy taught her to read. And like I said, a lot of narratives say that the children, their playmates, when they were playmates, they had a lot of time. And oftentimes these European children would teach other enslaved individuals how to read. So Kizzy's story is not an anomaly at all. And sometimes these playmates were their family members. They where the slave master would violate a woman, and they would actually be family. And I say, how has being banned from literacy for generation affected us as a people? This is why I say culture of ignorance. This is the name of it, our attitudes towards learning today. So culture of ignorance, episode 2 review. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, this is for those who want to go a little bit deeper. It's not surface. It's sponsored by Kane Cultural Boutique. I just launched this, so please feel free to go over there and support. I put the links in the box. This is a new arrival, just came in today. It's made to your specifications, so it takes a little bit, time to reach you. But when it does, you will be greatly enjoying recovering some of these cultural garments. I like this one a lot, and so I had to share this as well as the Soul Center, SOULONOMiCS, and Take Time to Heal. Soul Center is coming soon. So that is, wait a minute, you guys didn't see again? You are presenting your screen to everyone. I don't know. Did you guys see that? I don't know if you saw it today. My screen must have been bugging out today because I came back. I'm not sure if you saw it, if you saw me again. But if not, if you didn't see me, you heard me. And if you didn't see me, you heard me. And hopefully that was beneficial for you. How about this? I'll put a link to the presentation in the box because it's on Google. It's on Google Docs. So because it's on Google Docs, the presentation is there. So for those who didn't see it, and you may want the links or you may want the references, I'll go ahead and put the link in there so you can get it. So once again, my name is Amuna Yisrael. This has been SOULONOMiCS 101 Roots Review in depth. It says roots, right? You can't just get to the root by scrap. You got to go like deep. You got to like dig in the joint to get to the roots. So that's what we're doing today. We're getting to the root of this conversation. It takes some time. It takes some labor. It takes some effort. It takes some willingness. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. As look, the baby's here. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and see you tomorrow. And share this, share your thoughts, share your comments, and thank you for tuning in. 1.